Mount Kilauea in Hawaii seems to be blowing its stack. Why aren't they telling anybody the truth? Coming up next on Deceptions of the Ages News. Hello everybody, and welcome to Deceptions of the Ages News. Today we have a couple of big announcements. The first announcement I want to make is that I have officially been accepted as a candidate by the Secretary of State of Washington State. So now I'm officially in the Senate race for Washington State in 2018. And hopefully in August I will win the primary, and in November I will win the general election against my DNC opponent who has caused all of these problems for our country. So it's really exciting stuff. And before I continue any farther, don't let me forget to ask you to please subscribe to my channel if you like these kind of reports. All right, you guys, the first thing that we need to talk about today is something that is very important, and that is this eruption of Mount Kilauea in Hawaii. Now, we know that Mount Kilauea has been going off for many years, and nobody seems to make any big deal about it. But something different has happened, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit today about what is actually going on at the Kilauea volcano. But before we do that, we need a little background in what we call geology and plate tectonics. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our fabulous planet, the Earth. Let me pull the sticker off of this Washington State apple so I can make it look more authentic. All right, this is our Earth, okay? It's a beautiful Earth. It's actually blue in color from space, but we're going to talk today about what actually makes up the Earth. Now, outside of the Earth, this is called the crust, right? And it's solid in most states, and it also contains it holds our ocean, it holds our water and everything. And this mantle, or not the mantle, the crust is, in some places maybe 10 to maybe 100 miles deep, but it varies in thickness. Now, let's talk about, first of all, something that we've known that's been happening for a long time, and that is the shifting magnetic field. All right, so if I am in, let's say, Seattle right here, I'll make an S. I'm in Seattle here, and I have my compass out, right? So when I shoot my compass does not shoot straight to the North Pole. My compass actually shoots over here to what is Newfoundland in northern Canada. So what is actually happening now is that this magnetic north is moving, right? So every year they figure that the magnetic north, when you shoot an azimuth on your compass, it's going to shift about 10 miles. So what is happening is that this, our magnetic north is now moving to our, your left, my right, and it's actually moving westward, right? And so they figure that very soon the magnetic north will have moved from eastern northern Canada all the way to north of Russia. All right, so we know that there is, well, let me explain this very quickly. Why is it moving? Because there is molten iron ore inside of the mantle underneath the crust, and that is what draws the needle of the compass, because there's so much iron there. But that iron is actually moving, okay? So why is the iron moving? Is it moving by itself, or is something else moving? So that's what we need to talk about. Now, I'm going to talk to you now about what is called a hotspot. Now, I don't know if you've heard about a hotspot before, but a hotspot is a place where the Earth, for some reason, maybe the crust is very thin there and it allows a least resistance, but that is where magma is actually able to shoot up through the Earth through a very thin part and cause volcanic eruptions. Now, there are two main hotspots in the world today that we know of. One is in Yellowstone Park. And so that would be, I'm in Seattle here, so one hotspot would be over here in Yellowstone. Now the other hotspot is going to be all the way over here in Hawaii on Kilauea, right? Now this is what they're not telling people. So remember we talked about the magnetic pole shift is moving? All right, well they also know that this hotspot here in Yellowstone used to be over here, but the Earth keeps moving. It's moving to the east, or I'm sorry, it's moving to the west. So the hotspot is moving to the west. So you have a series of mountains that follow this chain, and it moves a little bit farther north. Okay, so what does this hotspot have to do with Hawaii? Well, let's just make sure we understand this. This hotspot does not stay in one place. It is constantly moving, and this hotspot is actually making its way toward the Pacific. Now, the hotspot in the Pacific in Hawaii is also moving. So it's moving in this direction. Now, if I show you, let's say this is Kilauea, this is what is called a cinder cone volcano. Now, Kilauea is a volcano because it's a hotspot. But when the Earth's crust is shifting, which it appears to have done, it is looking for a new place to send up that lava. Okay, so now, of course, a cinder cone has a lot of material sitting on top of it. Think of Mount Rainier or Mount St. Helens in Washington State. It's very hard for magma to work its way all the way up that chamber, so it's always easier to go out a vent on the side. And this is exactly what's happening in Hawaii. So what's happening in Hawaii is that the crust has most likely shifted over the hotspot. What does that mean? That means that Kilauea is actually going to grow another cinder cone right there on the eastern side of the island. And this is what they're not telling people. But before we go too much farther into this, let's just reiterate. Now, what happened in Yellowstone, if we go over here to Yellowstone, Yellowstone was a big volcano, a cinder cone volcano that actually collapsed on itself. And so the entire Yellowstone Park, thousands and thousands of acres, is actually what is called a caldera that collapsed upon itself. Now, if you go back over to Hawaii, we look like we're growing another cinder cone, right? So what's going to happen with that cinder cone? Well, many things could happen. But one thing that could be very dangerous for the people of Hawaii is if that were to, or the main volcano were to become a caldera. If that whole thing were to collapse, of course it would take the island with it, and of course the Pacific Ocean would rush in and it would kill everybody on the island. So that is probably the worst case scenario. But what is happening now, and this is what they're not telling anybody, is that they are growing another volcano in Hawaii. So what are you going to do about that? Well, you could leave the island, and I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about it, but they're listening to the powers that be. And remember, these are the same people that started a false missile alert, saying that there was something coming from North Korea. So the people in Hawaii that are in charge of civil defense, they're not telling the people the truth that this could be a potentially, I mean, this could kill everybody on the island if there's a major volcanic eruption. And why are they not telling anybody the truth about the potential dangers from this volcano? Well, the fact of the matter is it has everything to do with three things: incompetence, ignorance, and fear. Okay, the people that are in charge of the government in Hawaii, I talked about the civil defense thing. Obviously, anybody who would make a false missile alert is not very good at doing their job. And they are monitoring a volcano, but they're not telling anybody the truth about the potential hazards. Now that is gross and negligent incompetence, which is going to come back on people. Okay, the other thing is ignorance. People do not understand what is going on in that volcano, and they don't understand the potential hazards, because if they did, they would have been off that island a few days ago. Now, the last thing is greed. If Hawaii, with all of its expensive real estate, were to be evacuated, the banks that would lose money on their real estate holdings in Hawaii would probably end up collapsing, and it would cause probably either a major or either minor or a major collapse of the banking system in the United States, similar to 2007 and 2008. So they're not telling anybody that because they don't want to see property values fall down. So it's a really touchy situation, and if it were myself and I were worried about my family, I would evacuate that island. I would have done it a long time ago. And I'm not trying to cause a panic or anything, but if you are on that island or anywhere now, because you need to be aware, we've got volcanic activity in Yellowstone now, we've got a pole shift happening, and now we've got another hot spot that appears to be opening up in Hawaii. So it looks like the crust of the earth is on the move. And so we need to be ready for this, because if we're not, what are we all going to do? We're all going to end up starving to death or becoming cannibals and eating each other because there's no animals left to eat. So I want you guys to be very aware and very cautious about what's going on here. And I want you to be aware that they absolutely are not telling you the truth in the fake media. But what you're going to see over the next few days is you're going to see continuing more violent and more violent volcanic eruptions. And at that time you can say, oh, he told me so on Deceptions of the Ages News. Well, I'm not proud of that fact, but I have to tell you because nobody's telling you the truth about this. So if you are on the island, I would ask you to please consider watching and monitoring and trying to make plans to evacuate back to the mainland. And we'll see you next time on Deceptions of the Ages News.